The J Initial Shadow Test, a Jungian map for the chosen soul. The psyche stirs with an ancient knowing, a disquiet that wraps around your chest even amid the noise of daily existence. You feel it in the hollow hours before dawn, when the mind's defenses soften and truth seeps through the cracks of conscious denial. This is not coincidence, nor is it the paranoid fabrication of an overactive imagination. What you're experiencing is the self, that deeper divine intelligence within, reaching through the veil of ordinary consciousness to demand your attention. Someone whose name begins with J has entered your awareness not randomly, but as a psychic alarm system activating within the architecture of your soul. Perhaps you've dismissed the unease as social anxiety or misinterpreted the bodily signals as your own insecurity. But Jung understood what modern spirituality often overlooks. The body never lies about energetic truth. That tightness in your solar plexus when they text, that subtle exhaustion after your conversations, that inexplicable urge to check your words 3 times before speaking in their presence, these are not character flaws. They are your unconscious mind screaming what your conscious ego refuses to hear. You are being called to witness what Jung termed the confrontation with the shadow, not as paranoia, but as sacred individuation work. The ego seeks comfort in familiar faces and established patterns. It constructs elaborate justifications for maintaining connections that have spiritually expired. But the unconscious reveals deeper currents beneath surface loyalty. And when those currents turn toxic, the self intervenes with undeniable specificity. A letter, an initial, a name that repeats in your awareness until you can no longer pretend not to notice. This is why I mapped out a comprehensive framework in the 3 Keys to a Prosperous Life, a trilogy of wisdom, ebook plus audiobook, designed specifically for chosen ones who carry anointing but struggle with the psychological complexity of spiritual discernment. So many of you have been taught that doubt equals lack of faith, that boundaries equal lack of love. The blueprint I left in that work addresses precisely this confusion: how to honor your empathic sensitivity without becoming a psychic dumping ground, how to recognize projected shadows without taking on the guilt of judging others. The link is in the pinned comment below, and I mention it now because what follows requires both mystical awareness and psychological literacy, the marriage of spirit and psyche that authentic individuation demands. The anatomy of psychic dissonance. The tension you feel when this J person enters your space is not mere social discomfort. It is the collision of 2 psychic realities attempting to occupy the same energetic field. On the surface level, the realm of persona and social masks, everything may appear cordial, even supportive. They ask about your projects. They celebrate your wins with enthusiasm that seems genuine enough to pass casual inspection. But something underneath doesn't align, and that misalignment registers in your nervous system before your thinking mind can articulate why. Jung taught that the psyche operates on multiple levels simultaneously. The conscious ego navigates the day-to-day interactions, managing social etiquette and surface-level communication. But beneath that surface, the unconscious processes information through symbolic language, archetypal patterns, and somatic wisdom. When someone's conscious presentation contradicts their unconscious emanation, sensitive souls, those Jung would have recognized as naturally attuned to the collective unconscious, experience this as cognitive and emotional dissonance. Your body responds to psychic truth more accurately than your mind, which can be deceived by words, convinced by logical arguments, and manipulated by social conditioning that demands you give people the benefit of the doubt, even when every cellular intelligence within you screams otherwise. The tightness in your chest when they approach, that's your diaphragm constricting, an ancient mammalian response to threat that predates language and rational thought. the exhaustion after your encounters. That's the energetic cost of maintaining defensive barriers while simultaneously trying to appear open and friendly. A state of constant low-level hypervigilance that depletes your psychic resources. This J figure may not even be consciously aware of the shadow material they're projecting onto your field. Jung emphasized this crucial point. Most psychological harm comes not from conscious malice, but from unintegrated shadow content that spills unconsciously into relationship dynamics. They may genuinely believe they support your journey. They may sleep soundly at night, convinced of their good intentions. But the unconscious doesn't operate according to conscious intent. It moves according to unresolved complexes, childhood wounds, and archetypal patterns that have never been brought into the light of awareness. What makes this particularly confusing for empaths and chosen ones is that you can feel both realities simultaneously. You perceive their conscious kindness and their unconscious envy. You sense their stated support and their hidden resentment. This creates a maddening state of internal contradiction. How can someone who says they love me also wish, on some level, for my failure? The answer lies in understanding the fragmented nature of the unintegrated psyche. People are not singular, coherent entities, but multiplicities, collections of subpersonalities, complexes, and archetypal identifications that often contradict each other. The shadow mechanics of subtle sabotage. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, contains everything the ego has rejected as incompatible with its self-image. For someone who identifies as supportive friend or spiritual ally, feelings of envy, competition, and resentment must be repressed because acknowledging them would shatter their conscious self-concept. But psychological content doesn't disappear when repressed. It goes underground, operating from the unconscious, where it becomes more powerful precisely because it's unexamined. This is how the J person can offer you help that somehow always comes with invisible strings attached. They volunteer information, but later use what you shared as ammunition during moments of subtle undermining. They celebrate your victories, but with a particular tone that makes you feel vaguely ashamed for succeeding. They ask questions that sound like curiosity, but feel like interrogation, probing for weaknesses they can later exploit, not through conscious strategy, but through unconscious shadow compulsion. Jung called this phenomenon participation mystique, a state of psychological unconsciousness where boundaries between self and other remain blurred, allowing shadow material to transfer between psyches like an emotional contagion. When you interact with someone whose shadow remains unintegrated, you risk absorbing their disowned psychological content. Their unacknowledged self-hatred can make you suddenly question your worth. Their repressed rage at their own unrealized potential can leave you feeling inexplicably angry after your encounters. Their denied fear of inadequacy can trigger imposter syndrome in you, even when you were feeling confident moments before. The mechanism works like this. They project onto you the parts of themselves they cannot consciously own. If they've abandoned their own calling due to fear, they may unconsciously resent that you're pursuing yours. If they've settled for mediocrity to maintain social approval, your willingness to risk disapproval by following your authentic path becomes an unconscious mirror reflecting their own cowardice. And mirrors must be smashed or dimmed to protect the fragile ego structure. This is not conscious villainy. This is the wounded psyche's desperate attempt to maintain its self-deception by controlling the external environment. The sabotage, therefore, manifests in ways that maintain plausible deniability. They never overtly attack. That would make the shadow conscious, forcing them to examine their true feelings. Instead, they employ what Jung termed the negative, das Negative, a subtle undermining energy that operates through tone, timing, and emotional withdrawal at critical moments. They forget to mention the meeting where your name was discussed. They accidentally reveal information that damages your reputation while claiming innocence of intention. They consistently arrive late to commitments with you, but remain punctual with others. They praise you publicly, while privately planting seeds of doubt in the minds of mutual connections. Your psyche registers all of this. The conscious mind may rationalize each incident individually. Everyone makes mistakes. They've been under stress. I'm probably being too sensitive. But the unconscious tallies the pattern. This is why you feel crazy. The conscious narrative doesn't match the unconscious data. You're experiencing what therapists call gaslighting by proxy. The environment itself contradicts your felt experience, and over time, this erosion of trust in your own perception becomes the deepest wound. The archetypal drama of betrayal and chosen identity. Every initiate walking the path of spiritual maturation must eventually encounter the betrayer archetype. This is not accidental, but structurally necessary within the hero's journey that Jung identified as the primary narrative of individuation. You cannot become fully conscious without confronting the reality that not everyone who claims to love you actually serves your highest unfolding. Some people enter your story precisely to teach you discernment through the pain of misplaced trust. The Judas archetype appears across mythological traditions because it represents an essential psycho-spiritual dynamic. The one who walks closest often carries the potential for deepest wounding. Jung understood this through his own experience, his painful split with Freud, whom he had once called father figure and mentor. That betrayal nearly destroyed Jung emotionally. Yet it became the catalyst for his most profound psychological discoveries. The wound forced him to descend into his own unconscious, to confront his own shadow material, to differentiate his psychology from Freud's patriarchal structure. This J person in your life carries that archetypal weight. They may embody the friend who becomes enemy, the ally who transforms into adversary, the supporter whose support curdles into sabotage. In biblical narrative, we see this pattern with Saul and David. Saul initially loved David, promoted him, celebrated his victories. But as David's anointing became increasingly visible, as the prophetic calling on his life began to manifest in undeniable ways, Saul's unintegrated shadow erupted. His repressed inadequacy, his unexamined fear, his denied envy transformed love into murderous rage. The chosen identity carries a specific psychological burden that Jung termed the weight of vocation. When the self calls a soul toward a particular destiny, that calling radiates from the psyche like a frequency that others unconsciously detect. Some respond with genuine celebration, recognizing and honoring the divine signature. But others, particularly those whose own callings remain unacknowledged or abandoned, respond with unconscious hostility. Your very presence becomes a mirror reflecting their unlived life, and that reflection is unbearable. This is why chosen ones often report feeling isolated, even in community, misunderstood even by those who claim spiritual kinship. The anointing you carry activates shadow material in those who've refused their own initiatory journey. Your willingness to face uncertainty triggers those who've chosen safety. Your commitment to authenticity challenges those who've built identities on pretense. You don't intend to be threatening, but the self shining through your individuation process is inherently disruptive to those still trapped in collective consciousness and ego identification. The J person's shadow may not yet be conscious enough to articulate, "I resent your freedom because I'm imprisoned by my own fear." Instead, it emerges as criticism disguised as concern, as advice that subtly undermines your confidence, as support that feels more like surveillance. They position themselves close to your journey, not to truly accompany you, but to manage their anxiety about their own stagnation. Proximity to your light allows them to feel spiritually relevant without doing the actual shadow work required for genuine transformation. The synchronistic precision of divine warnings, Jung's concept of synchronicity, revolutionized how we understand meaningful coincidence. He recognized that the psyche doesn't operate solely through linear causality, but also through acausal connections, patterns of meaning that link inner psychological states with outer events in ways that transcend mere chance. When you encounter this message now, at this precise moment in your journey, containing this specific warning about a J initial, you are witnessing synchronicity in action. The collective unconscious, that vast reservoir of human experience, archetypal imagery, and psycho-spiritual wisdom that transcends individual consciousness, speaks through your personal psyche in the language of symbols, patterns, and uncanny timing. The fact that you feel compelled to engage with this content right now, despite having perhaps hundreds of other options for your attention, suggests that something in your unconscious recognizes itself in these words. Something knows it needs to hear this warning precisely now before damage becomes irreparable. Synchronicities intensify during threshold moments in the individuation process. Jung observed that when the psyche prepares for significant transformation, what he called enantiodromia, a swing to the opposite, the boundary between conscious and unconscious becomes more permeable. Dreams become more vivid, intuitions sharpen, and the external world seems to conspire in communicating essential truths. You start seeing repeated numbers, encountering the same symbols across different contexts, and experiencing coincidences that carry undeniable emotional and spiritual weight. The J initial appearing with such specificity is the self's way of breaking through ego denial. The conscious mind can rationalize vague warnings. Oh, this probably applies to many people. But when the unconscious provides concrete details, a letter, a specific relationship dynamic, a particular feeling tone that matches your lived experience, it becomes nearly impossible to dismiss as projection or paranoia. The psyche is saying, stop ignoring what you already know. Stop pretending this unease is your problem to fix. This is real and you must act on it. What makes this particularly significant is that divine warnings through synchronicity always arrive with appropriate timing. You're not receiving this message 5 years ago, before you had the spiritual maturity to understand it, nor 5 years from now, when the damage might be complete. You're encountering it now in the narrow window when you still have agency to respond differently, to implement boundaries before betrayal fully manifests, to protect your sacred work before sabotage becomes irreversible. The energetic vampirism of unmetabolized projection. When someone projects their unintegrated shadow material onto you, they're essentially asking you to carry psychological weight that belongs to them. Jung called this phenomenon psychic inflation or deflation, depending on the direction of projection. In your case, with the J person, they're likely projecting their own unrealized potential, their abandoned dreams, their denied power onto your actualized journey, and then unconsciously resenting you for succeeding where they've failed to even try. This creates what energy workers would call vampirism, though Jung would describe it as participation mystique, an unconscious psychic entanglement where your energy resources become drained, maintaining a false relational equilibrium. Every interaction requires you to manage not only your own emotional and mental content, but also to absorb and process theirs. You find yourself emotionally translating their passive aggression, mentally defending against their subtle criticisms, spiritually shielding from their envious emanations, all while trying to maintain the social pretense that nothing is wrong. The exhaustion you feel after encounters isn't physical tiredness, but psychic depletion. You've spent hours, sometimes days, untangling yourself from the projective identification they've woven around you. They leave conversations feeling somehow lighter, having offloaded their unconscious material onto your field, while you remain heavy with confusion, self-doubt, and a vague sense of having been violated in ways you can't quite articulate. This dynamic becomes especially insidious when the J person positions themselves as spiritually aligned with you. They use the language of awakening, employ the vocabulary of consciousness, perhaps even claim empathic gifts themselves. This makes their shadow projections harder to identify because they're cloaked in spiritual pretense. They're not obviously toxic. They would never survive your initial screening if they were. Instead, they've learned to mimic the frequencies of authentic spiritual connection while operating from an entirely different motivation structure. Jung emphasized that the most dangerous shadow material appears in religious and spiritual contexts, precisely because those environments provide perfect camouflage. Someone can claim to hold space for you while actually surveilling your vulnerabilities. They can offer to mirror your growth while actually projecting their own unexamined issues. They can speak about divine timing while unconsciously working to delay your progress so they don't feel left behind in their own stagnation. The projection mechanism operates like this. They see in you what they've disowned in themselves. If they've repressed their own ambition as unspiritual, they'll unconsciously perceive you as too ambitious and subtly shame you for your drive. If they've denied their own need for recognition, they'll criticize your visibility as ego-driven. If they've abandoned their creativity to please others, they'll undermine your artistic expression as self-indulgent. Every critique they level at you is actually a confession of their own shadow, but until they become conscious enough to recognize this, you pay the price for their psychological fragmentation. The sacred necessity of conscious solitude, individuation, Jung insisted, cannot occur within the comfort of collective consensus. At certain critical junctures, the soul must withdraw from relationship, from community, from all external validation and familiar supports to descend into the unknown territory of its own depths. This is not antisocial pathology, but spiritual maturity. The recognition that true transformation happens in solitude, in the darkness where no witnesses can interfere with the self's direct instruction. You are being called to such a withdrawal now. The J connection must be released not out of anger or vengeance, but out of sacred self-preservation. The ego interprets this as loneliness, as social failure, as evidence that you're somehow deficient in relationship skills. But the self knows that certain connections drain the psychic energy required for the next phase of your becoming. Every hour spent managing someone else's unconscious projections is an hour stolen from your own soul work, your own creative emergence, your own communion with the divine intelligence orchestrating your unfolding. Jung's own life demonstrates this principle. After his break with Freud, he entered what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a 6-year period, 1913 to 1919, of intense psychological crisis, where he withdrew from much of his social and professional world. His colleagues thought he'd gone mad. His reputation suffered, but in that sacred solitude, he descended into the archetypal depths that would later become the foundation for his entire body of work. The Red Book, his record of that descent, reveals a man willing to sacrifice social acceptability for soul authenticity. Your situation mirrors this archetypal pattern. You cannot complete your individuation while maintaining connections that require you to fragment yourself. The J person demands a version of you that's small enough not to trigger their envy, dimmed enough not to reflect their own unlived potential, accessible enough that they can continue draining your resources without reciprocal energetic exchange. To remain in relationship with them is to agree to a form of psychic suicide, the slow erasure of your authentic self to accommodate their unconscious needs. Sacred solitude provides the container for integration work that cannot happen amid relational demands. When you stop managing others' emotional reactions to your growth, you suddenly have access to vast amounts of psychic energy previously spent on that management. When you release relationships based on pretense, you create space for connections rooted in genuine soul recognition. When you honor the self's directive toward withdrawal, you demonstrate the spiritual maturity required for the next level of calling. The ego's elaborate defense mechanisms. The most challenging aspect of this J situation is not the external person, but your own internal resistance to seeing clearly. The ego constructs sophisticated defense mechanisms to avoid the pain of acknowledging betrayal, especially when that betrayal comes from someone you've trusted, invested in, or loved. Jung identified several of these defenses, and you're likely experiencing multiple simultaneously. Rationalization appears first. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Everyone has bad days. I should give them another chance. This defense allows the ego to maintain its preferred narrative. I am loved. I am supported. I choose my connections wisely, rather than face the disturbing truth that someone you've allowed into your inner circle carries malicious intent, conscious or not. Rationalization feels reasonable, even spiritually mature, which makes it particularly insidious. It disguises itself as compassion, as seeing the best in people, as not being judgmental, when it's actually cowardice avoiding painful truth. Projection follows. Maybe I'm just envious and projecting my own issues onto them. This defense turns the psyche's accurate warning system against itself, weaponizing therapeutic language to gaslight your own intuition. While it's true that we sometimes project our shadow onto others, this becomes a convenient excuse to dismiss legitimate concerns. The ego prefers to believe you're the problem, because that maintains a sense of control, rather than accepting the helpless reality that someone external threatens your well-being. Denial operates beneath both. Nothing's really wrong. I'm creating drama where none exists. This most primitive defense simply refuses to acknowledge what the unconscious clearly perceives. You explain away the evidence, minimize the pattern, focus obsessively on isolated positive interactions while ignoring the overwhelming trajectory. Denial requires enormous psychic energy to maintain, which is why you feel so exhausted. You're fighting your own knowing every moment you spend with this person. Jung understood that these defenses exist for a reason. They protect the ego from experiencing more reality than it can currently metabolize. There's a developmental aspect to psychological maturity. We can only see what we're ready to integrate. But here's the critical distinction. Readiness is not the same as comfort. You may never feel ready to face the J betrayal because the ego never wants to face painful truth. Readiness means having developed sufficient ego strength to tolerate disillusionment without fragmenting. And if you're engaging this content, you likely already possess that strength. The ego's final, most sophisticated defense is spiritual bypass. I should just forgive and release this to the universe. Holding on to resentment only hurts me. This sounds evolved, but actually functions as avoidance. Real forgiveness can only occur after full acknowledgement of harm. What the ego calls forgiveness in these situations is often premature peacemaking that bypasses the grief, rage, and disillusionment that need to be felt and metabolized. You cannot forgive what you haven't first allowed yourself to be angry about. You cannot release what you haven't first allowed yourself to grieve. The mythological weight of the chosen path, your identification as chosen, is not ego inflation, but archetypal recognition. Jung would have understood this as the activation of the hero archetype within your psyche. This archetype doesn't make you superior to others. It simply denotes a particular psycho-spiritual configuration where the call to individuation arrives with undeniable force, often early in life, disrupting any possibility of unconscious, conventional existence. The hero archetype carries specific trials embedded in its structure. Joseph Campbell, building on Jung's work, identified the road of trials as an inevitable stage where the hero faces tests that separate superficial allies from true companions. The J person represents exactly this kind of test. They appear supportive on the surface, but reveal their shadow nature under pressure, particularly as your light becomes brighter and your calling more visible. Every mythological tradition contains the betrayer figure who walks closest to the hero. Judas beside Christ, Loki among the Norse gods, set against Osiris, Brutus with Caesar. These are not random historical accidents, but recurring archetypal patterns in the collective unconscious. The betrayer serves a crucial function in the hero's maturation. They force the development of discernment. They shatter naive trust in surface appearances. They teach that love without wisdom becomes dangerous vulnerability. The chosen ones, those carrying what Jung called vocation, threaten the collective's homeostasis simply by existing authentically. The mass of humanity lives unconsciously, following scripts inherited from family, culture, and collective conditioning. But the chosen soul cannot follow these scripts. Something within demands original expression, refuses inherited limitations, insists on direct relationship with the divine rather than mediated religion. This inherent rebellion against collective norms triggers shadow responses in those still identified with consensus reality. Your journey parallels the archetypal pattern of the marked one. Moses hidden in rushes, Arthur raised in obscurity, Jesus born in a manger. The chosen status often begins with concealment, with a period of not knowing your own significance. But as the calling activates and becomes visible, it generates two responses: genuine recognition from those operating at similar consciousness, and unconscious hostility from those threatened by your differentiation. The J person falls into this second category. Jung emphasized that bearing archetypal energy requires tremendous psychological fortitude. You're not just dealing with personal ego dynamics, but carrying transpersonal forces that want to incarnate through your particular life. The collective unconscious seeks consciousness through individual psyches, and when it selects a vessel, a chosen one, that selection comes with both gift and burden. The gift is access to wisdom, synchronicity, and creative power beyond normal ego capacity. The burden is the isolation that comes from operating at frequencies most people cannot perceive or tolerate. The alchemical dissolution of false bonds, Jungian psychology, draws extensively from alchemical symbolism to describe the individuation process. What you're experiencing with the J relationship is the nigredo stage, the blackening, the putrefaction, where false elements must decompose before authentic essence can emerge. In medieval alchemy, the nigredo was considered the most difficult phase, and characterized by darkness, depression, and the apparent death of the previous form. The alchemists understood something modern consciousness has forgotten. Transformation requires destruction. You cannot refine gold while preserving all the original ore. You cannot distill wine while keeping all the grape material. You cannot birth your authentic self while maintaining every relationship and identity structure you've previously constructed. Somet.